Hi, everybody. My name is Caitlin Barrich, and I'm a senior here at the University of Arizona in Sustainably Built Environments. For my capstone, I wanted to take a deeper dive into carbon emissions within the construction industry. What prompted me to choose this focus was the alarming rate that I see my environment deteriorating around me. When I look at data about climate change, scientists agree that without major action to reduce carbon emissions, global temperatures are going to rise by almost 8 degrees by 2100, by year 2100. We're already seeing catastrophic heat waves, droughts, flooding, and it's having serious impacts on our ecosystems now. So thinking about an 8-degree rise is detrimental to humanity itself. With the current trajectory of methods that are being used to keep carbon emissions at bay, we are only going to be seeing about a 28% decrease in carbon emissions. This comes from President Biden's goal to reach 50 to 52% carbon emission decrease by 2030. With only being able to reach 28% by 2030, I think that change needs to be looked at under a microscope, and we need to really figure out where sustainable techniques to limit carbon emissions can take effect. My research question was, what is the construction industry doing to limit carbon emissions, and how are these methods faring limiting carbon emissions? With my methodology, I looked at academic data analysis, I composed a survey, and I conducted an interview. Data collected expresses the problem with current methods of CO2 limiting construction techniques. It also, alternatives are found that challenge current methods in construction. My data from my academic data analysis showed that there are techniques that limit CO2 emissions and are cost effective, such as material reuse, locally sourced materials, sustainable materials, alternative fuels, such as biotech diesel, the concept of modular construction and lean construction, just to name a few. Incentives are also used to combat carbon emissions in the construction industry at the builder's discretion. I found that 38% of carbon emissions globally are from new construction, which is alarming. That's almost 50% of the CO2 in the atmosphere is from new construction and the construction industry itself. So I wanted to see at first what was holding people back from attempting to build more sustainable. I put out a survey and it showed that the public is ready for change. In fact, 70% of the public believe that CO2 emissions in the construction industry is important to focus on. The interviews I conducted showed that 50% of companies do not seek out incentives to continue the use of methods that are believed to be cost effective, meaning the incentives that are already in place to guide builders and contractors to build more sustainable are not regulated. It is more of a suggestion. So builders who are in a specific path of how they do construction don't see the benefit of using sustainable techniques because it's all about the bottom line. If it's going to cost more in the long run, they don't want to attempt it. They will continue using traditional building methods. When I interviewed 2 companies, one company was very adamant that sustainability is not going to thrive in the construction industry, meaning that if it's going to cost more, they're not even going to look into it because it's all about the bottom line, especially for businesses and people who are putting down the money to have these contractors build the building. It also showed that, on the other hand, there are companies out there who are looking deeper into sustainable techniques because there is a market out there. There are people who care about the environment and they want their buildings to be more sustainable during the construction process as well as after it is realized. Now, The discussion about the data wrap-up shows that regional incentives are used to persuade contractors to build sustainable. The incentives are along the lines of a tax break if you use specific alternative materials. If your building runs with specific accreditation, such as LEED certifications or green building certifications, you do get a tax break depending on which region you are in. The problem with building codes and implementing these incentives into a building code to force it upon contractors to build a certain way is that every region has different building codes. Every region has specific attributes that allow the builders to coexist with the environment in a way. Some areas aren't going to need heavy, dense building envelopes, especially in arid desert areas. They're not going to need like 14 inches of insulation in their walls. However, in Washington or Alaska, you're going to want a hefty amount of insulation within your walls. Now, there are more sustainable methods to insulate the walls of a building, but it really depends on the region you're in. And you cannot force that and have a universal building code throughout the United States that shows how to do something like that. So these incentives are cherry-picked between climate, region, builders, contractors, and businesses. And if it is going to cost more, they are not going to utilize the incentives at all. They'll save more money completing their building using traditional methods. The cost-effective CO2 limiting techniques that can be used as alternatives to current methods are the idea of biodiesel, for an example. The reason why biodiesel isn't being used in the big rigs that construction sites use, such as an excavator or stuff like that, are because biodiesel is a little more expensive than regular diesel anyways, even though it's 10 times better for the environment. It emits less carbon emissions and it is cleaner to burn. Unfortunately, there aren't too many places that are nearby these building sites that even sell biodiesel. It's not available. It is more costly. Therefore, that's not an option for them. They're not going to use those options. A conclusion that I came to was mandating an educational certificate on modern, cost-effective CO2 limiting construction techniques for all contractors and construction agents that is updated almost every 2 years would inhibit the utilization of CO2 limiting techniques. This would aid in the USA's 2030 goal. Since we can't mandate incentives, what we can do is educate the people who are in that industry. The more we spread the word that there are CO2 limiting construction techniques that can be used instead of traditional, that are cost effective, the more they will become available, cheaper, and less carbon emissions will be emitted into the environment. We are at a point, we are coming close to the point of no return. NASA states that by 2035, we have reached a tipping point where irreversible damage will have happened to our environment that is going to have direct effects to humanity. And if we want to start somewhere in the construction industry, we should look into how to educate the people within to run a better operation with less carbon emissions. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.